Good evening, everyone. My name is Oyin Ojukudu, and I'm going to be taking you through the introduction to Java lectures. And we are going to be having the class from 8 to 10 p.m. today, but about 9:45. I'm going to stop the class then, and then answer any questions you may have. And you can put your questions in the chat box as we go along so that you don't forget, and I'll be able to answer them at the end of the class as well. And if you want to keep your questions to the end of the class also, and you want to unmute yourself to speak, that's also fine. But if not, you can be putting them in the chat as the class goes on, and I'm going to pick them up afterwards. So 15 minutes to the end of the class, hopefully, or 10 minutes before the end of the class. And I believe the recording is also going to be shared, hopefully before the weekend. And you can obviously demonstrate everything that is going to be taught today. So moving on, we're looking into introduction to Java. And the reason why we're looking at Java programming language specifically is because you would be using it for the automation testing practice as well. And so that's why we're looking into Java basics and a few other topics as well. So moving on, you've probably heard the word Java, C#, C++, or Python, or Ruby, or any other names like that. So they are basically referred to as programming languages. And Java is just one of the popular programming languages created in 1995 and owned by Oracle. And more than 3 million or 3 billion devices run Java on them. And another key information I can say about Java is it is a class-based, object-oriented programming language, simple to learn compared to others, and the syntax is also similar to those of C programming language or C++. Like I mentioned previously, it is an object-oriented programming, and Java is obviously used for your mobile applications, your desktop applications, websites, web applications, used for game development and database connections, just to mention a few, and also for web services application as well. And you may probably be wondering, why do people use Java? So like I mentioned, it's one of the most popular programming language, easy to learn and simple to use. It is open source and free. And then it is also fast, secure, and it works on different platforms as well. Works on Linux, Raspberry Pi, Mac, Windows operating system. And it has a huge community support online. So if you've got like any issues or anything relating to Java, you can obviously find communities online that you can probably register with, and then they would be able to resolve your queries and all if you're not able to do that by yourself. And like I mentioned previously, it is similar to C#, and C++. And that is what makes it easy for developers or programmers to switch to Java or C# and vice versa, just to switch in between them. And obviously easy to pick up as well. And like I mentioned previously as well, it is an object-oriented programming. And this obviously gives clear structures to program and allows the code to be reusable. And the reusability is what we're going to see when we are obviously looking into automation frameworks. You would obviously see the reusability ability there. And then moving on, I usually give people tips on how to learn Java. So just try to understand the basic syntax, what variables are, the data types, what we mean by data types, the operators, just the basics of Java, object-oriented programming, methods, what does method mean, how do we use the different types of loops? That's just understanding the basics, then you'll be able to understand the complex side. And then I would obviously say regular reading, like just keeping yourself up to date, and just basically informing yourself as well, like personal development, personal learning, and practice. Yeah. If you don't practice things, you forget easily. So I always tell people to practice. And then also patience. The reason why I have patience there is I never knew I could be angry until I started learning coding and all. And then you just have to be patient with yourself. You may have omitted a comma or a full stop, and you may just find it a bit challenging to resolve them because you obviously missed that tiny little thing. And when you figure that out, you probably just lose it or something. But yeah, just be patient with yourself, and also paying attention to details. I've probably said that like 3 or 4 times this week. Like paying attention to details is also important. So we're going to see that as well as we go along. And I've got like relevant study links that you can use, and I can obviously share this into the QA Guild group later on today, or hopefully by tomorrow. And if I don't, please, someone can just remind me. And these are like not the popular ones, but the ones I would probably recommend. And they're also open source as well. And they've got loads of information for you to read up on also. And also, I know a few of them have got like practical, like a practical platform. You could obviously practice the codes that you're learning also. An example is going to be W3 Schools. As you're learning, they put like little quizzes there for you just to test you and test your knowledge on what you're learning also. So yeah, and we also have Udemy. Some of the, or most of the videos on Udemy may not be free. You probably need to pay for some of them. And they're obviously like different tutors that obviously teach the Java programming language in different, similar ways, but like maybe different approaches. So you could obviously look into that as well. And then the topics we're going to be covering, we would be looking into how to write the popular Hello World programming syntax, and then we'll look into variables, data types, and operators, conditional statements, and loops. And the other person taking the program, the lecture is going to be looking into object-oriented programming concepts. So that's where you look at classes, methods, objects, constructors, inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction, and encapsulation. And this is going to be taking next week, Thursday, I believe. But we are going to try to cover the first 3 topics today and tomorrow, by God's grace. And yeah, so moving on, we have the most popular, or the popular Java syntax. And I also forgot to mention, as I'm showing my lecture slides, I would obviously move into Intellij as well, just to show you the practical side also. And also, you would obviously see the color changes as well. So the colors are not going to look like this. They'll look different in Intellij. So you would obviously see that as well along the line. So we have the popular Java syntax, and obviously each of the lines represents something, and I'm going to try to explain them to you. I've obviously added the different sections. We've got a block of comments. I know a couple of people have experienced comments this week. So this is a block of comments where we have the slash asterisk and asterisk slash. So this is the opening section of the block of comments and the closing section. And we also have the single line comments. And that is where we have just a double slash in front of the sentence. So single line comments, and we've got a block of comments. We have what we call the identifiers. So we've got the public class, first Java class, and that is our class identifier. And what does that actually signify? We're going to obviously look into identifiers, but just to give you like a simple understanding of what it means. And before I move on to that, I just wanted to say one more thing about the comments. So obviously, comments are important when you're writing a programming language because it obviously explains the code. And in a situation whereby you're probably not at work and somebody just helping you to take a look, just helping take a look at your code, having comments that will obviously help the person to understand what exactly you've done in your block of code or anything that you're probably working on. So we always encourage people to have comments in their codes just to explain what specific lines are doing, or why do you have this specific style of code in your work, just to obviously support some of the codes you're writing as well, like explain what's basically happening there. And like I mentioned during the week, comments are not going to be executed when you're compiling or running your program code. They are basically going to be ignored because you've put them in asterisks, you've put them in slash and asterisks, and also the double slash in front of it basically means that you want Java to basically ignore that line because you don't need it to run, and it's just there for like comment purposes. And then we have the keyword called class, and it basically contains data and methods used in Java. And the method in this case is going to be the first Java class, which defines the behavior of the class itself. And the next thing, or the next part of the syntax we're going to look at, is the static void. And the void basically tells the method to return nothing. Void means something that is empty. So you don't want your line of code to return anything. And then the static keyword tells this method that it is accessible without initiating the class. Like all of these things that I'm basically talking about is going to be explained further as we go along. When you look into object-oriented programming that I'll be taking next week, I'm looking into identifiers taking this week and variables as well. So everything is going to be coming together. I just wanted to put this out there just in case we obviously do variables today, maybe identifiers tomorrow. Then when you go back to watching the video, you obviously understand what I was saying at the start. And then we have system.out.print, and this basically prints out the word, the sentence, or the word that you have in the double quotes on your terminal or your console. And why do we have system.out? So system.out is the standard output stream, and this is used to produce the results of the program onto a device like the computer screen. So for instance, it's going to be a console. And then we have the print line, print ln, and is basically used to display text on the console and prints the text on the console. And that's just the importance of that one. And you can obviously see we've got the string arg, so string argument. So this, like the within the two brackets, the two outer brackets. So this is where arguments are going to be passed into the main function. So if we want to pass maybe a string or an integer based on what we are writing within the bracket, so this is where we're going to be passing all the arguments and parameters. So now that I've kind of explained what all of this is, I'm going to open up my Intellij now and then just show you how you would create a Java project and type all of this in, and also maybe further explain it as well. And like I said, if you've got any questions, just put them in the chat box and I'll answer them at the end of the class. So just going to open up my Intellij. new project. New project. And for the language, I need to ensure that the Java option is being clicked on. The build system, I will pick Intellij. And then I need to also specify the location. Yeah, this is where I want my project to be stored in. And what would I call it? I would say Java programming. And you can see the way I've named the project. There's no space in between it. So that's just something you need to take note of. So there's no space in between. If you're going to be putting any space, maybe you want to put an underscore or no space at all. So that's just it. So once I've done that, I'm going to click on create. And that basically opens a new Intellij screen or window for me. Yeah. And the next thing I'm going to do is I've got an SRC folder, and that is where I'm going to be creating all my Java classes. So every single Java class I'm going to be creating or I want to create, they would all be under SRC folder. And all you need to do is right click, click on new, and then click on Java class. And what do I want to call my Java class? I would call it first Java program. And you need to click on the class option, not the interface or any other one, just the class. Double click on that. And it's going to create a new file for me under SRC, and click on add. If you have this option coming up, just click on add. If you don't have the option coming up, that's also fine as well. That basically means that your Intellij is not connected to the Git repo. Mine is connected, so that's why I'm having that pop-up come up. But if you don't have the pop-up come up, then you can just ignore it. I'm just going to close all of these ones. And then I've got my new Java class under SRC called first Java program. And you can obviously see this is how it looks like. And if I'm going to be putting my block of comments or any other thing I want to do, my block of comment can be either be inside the two brackets or outside the method. So if I'm going to be putting my block of comment, I'm going to start with that one. So the block of comments basically start with a slash, asterisk, and then this is the opening section. So you need to have a closing section as well, asterisk and slash. And what I want to write, or the comment I want to put out there, is going to be in between all of this. So I can have something like so excited. This is my first Java program. I'm so excited to learn. And even if you put any gibberish there as well, they all get ignored, but it's always good to put something meaningful there in case somebody else is looking at your code and just wants to understand what the code is all about. So I'm going to remove this one, just this line. And this is just how the block of comments is meant to look like. And then moving on next, I'm going to be creating my main method inside the first Java program method as well. And how was the main method started? We have public static void main. And then this bracket is what I mentioned, your parameters or your arguments are going to be inside. And another thing you need to take note of is I've got an opening bracket. Opening brackets would require a closing bracket. If there's no closing brackets, then there's going to be an error. You can see here, it's showing me. And one thing about Intellij that I like as well is it would tell you what the issue is. So you just basically need to read it, try to understand it. And sometimes it gives you suggested solutions. And there are some times that you would take up the solution and implement them. And there are just sometimes that you don't, because the solution could actually mess up your code. And that's not what you were expecting it to do. So in this case, it is telling us that a closing bracket is expected. So what do I need to do? Put a closing bracket in there, and then the error goes away. And what I'm going to be writing now needs to be inside this my main method. So we've got two methods here. We've got the first Java program, and then we've also got the main method. And it is in the main method you want to be writing all of your code. So now, how do I write a single line comment? So like I mentioned, single line comment starts with double slashes. And then I'm just going to say, this is a comment. You can have as many single line comments as you want, but it's always good to make them look nice in your code so it doesn't look like too clustered and all. So I can put another single line comment that says, print out my name and hello world. Another thing you should take note of is the coloring scheme as well. You can see comments are grayed out, or they are gray in color. And then the main is yellow in color. And then the keywords, public static void, public class, those are called keywords in Java. And those have got their own color scheme as well. So now I've basically added a comment here that says, print out my name and hello world. So how do I print out again? So like I showed you in the presentation slide, we use this specific line of code, system.out.print line. So Intellij also suggests line of codes for you. So you just basically need to pick the one that suits your need. So I'm going to say print. So there are different prints. You want to print an integer, a character, long value, float, double string, Boolean. And I just want to print a line out. So I'm going to do the print line. And then what do I want to print out? I kind of mentioned I wanted to print out my name. And I want to print out hello world. So I can say my name is Oyin. And you should notice the print sentence are in double quotes. The reason why I'm emphasizing this is because people watch videos, they don't do exactly what was shown in the video. So just follow the same line of code basically. So double quotes are important. If you paste anything outside of the double quotes, it's going to be showing you an error because it just doesn't understand what you want it to do. And I also have a double column at the end. So in Java, double column basically means that is the end of that line of code. If you don't have a double column there, it's going to be showing you an error as well. And it's going to tell you what is expected, double column expected. So you need to add that. And then it basically takes the error away. And then I also said I wanted to print out hello world. I'm going to print out hello world. And I'm going to try to run this now. And this is going to display the result in my console. And click on run Java program file. Run Java program.main. Running that. Yeah, so that has basically run, and you can see the result down here. My name is Oyin Odukudu, and it also printed out hello world as well. So you can, if you want to print anything out in Java, you can type whatever you want to print as far as is inside of this syntax. It's basically going to be printed out in your console as well. So I can print out, this is the introduction to Java class. And if I run that, then it's also going to be printed out to the screen. So while that one is running, I just want to quickly mention something else. Yep, so that is printed to the screen. You can see it printed 3 lines containing different sentences for me. My name is Onyodukudu, hello world, and this is the introduction to Java class. And then I kind of mentioned I wanted to say something as well. And you can obviously notice something. So the name of the class defined is first Java program, and it is also the name of the file. And that was why I called initially at the start. And this is just not a coincidence, because in Java, all of your code must reside inside the class. And there must at least be one public class which contains the main method. And this is the main method that is contained inside the first Java program class. So if I decide to create a new Java class now, it's also going to create a new public class for me. So let's give that a try. If I create a new one and just call it testing, just testing, you need to pick the class option. And then you can see the file name and the class name are the same. And that is actually expected. So that is us done with the Java syntax. And moving on, we are going to be moving on to variables, data types, and operators in Java. Sorry, I'm just bringing up my notes. So under the variable data types and operators, we're going to be looking at what we call identifiers, reserved words, variables, data types, operators, and the likes. And we would also be doing the practical side as well in Intellij as we go along. So I'm going to be doing them step by step. I think after I'm done with the identifiers, I would go to Intellij to show you what identifiers are. The identifiers we've seen in the last Java class we created, and we would also create a separate class as well that is going to run identifiers for us. Good. So so what are identifiers? So they're basically the names that help us to identify objects or methods. They're basically used for identification purposes. And then identifiers, for instance, around us are things that have got names. You've got your desktop, your bottle, your pen. The pen itself is a name, and it's what we refer to as identifiers. So in Java, an example of an identifier would be like class name, which, for instance, in the class that we just created is first Java class program. That was what we called it. So that is the identifier in that instance. We've got method names as well. We've got variable names. So these are what we refer to as identifiers. And okay, I'm going to ask us a question now. So can someone give me an example of the identifier in this Java code here? So I said identifiers can be class name, method name, variable name. So can someone just give me an example? I'm going to check the chat. Yeah, someone said ABC. That's correct.
I was gonna say that as well.
Okay, thank you. So
What about
any
the name
other
public
examples?
class?
So not public class. So the identifier there is ABC. So the
Okay.
public class is not going to be considered as an identifier.
All right.
Yeah. So ABC, yes. I think there are like 2 other identifiers there. So can anyone else identify that?
Void main.
No.
String.
Just gonna check.
Main and
Not
Z.
10.
Z, letter Z.
Yes, exactly. Yes, the Z is an identifier name. So I'm just going to show us the answers. So these are the identifiers that we have in the syntax. We have the ABC, the main, the string, the variable name called arg, the variable name here called Z as well. So these are identifiers used for identification purposes, or examples of identifiers used for identification purposes in Java. So moving on, we've got rules for naming them. And I don't think I've mentioned this. So Java is case sensitive. String with capital S is not the same as string with small s. So you just need to be careful when you're writing your code. So the first rule we have here is the only characters in Java, the only allowed characters in Java identifiers are lower cases A to Z, capital cases A to Z, 0 to 9, the $sign, and the underscore. So an example of these, or an example of an identifier name can be just gonna put. So an example of an identifier name would be car2. As far as it follows this rule, then it's valid. Or we can have something like, trying to think of something meaningful. Can't really think of anything meaningful, but so this is an example of an identifier name. And the other rule says that predefined class names and interface name can be used. So an example of predefined class name is string. So this is considered as an identifier when you use it. And then identifiers cannot start with a digit. And this is obviously true because something like this is an invalid identifier. And I'm pretty sure when you type that in Intellij and use it in the place that is meant to be used, it's going to be coming up as an error for you, like a red line underneath it. Probably invalid, considered as invalid, or your test is just going to be failing. So you just need to fix that. So identifiers cannot start with digits. And they are obviously case sensitive, like I mentioned previously. And also, there is no limits or there's no length limit for identifiers. You can add them up onto whenever, but obviously the recommended letter limit is between 4 to 15 characters or 15 letters. And reserved words cannot be used. I'm going to look at what reserved words are, so that you know what they are, and just so that you're informed that they cannot be used in places of or they cannot be used for identification purposes, because that's what identifiers are for. So I'm going to look at reserved words as well. And so these are examples of valid identifiers. So we said capital or lower cases, this can pass. They don't have length limit for the letters, but 4 to 5 is allowed, but this is also allowed, just the Z. Then underscores are allowed, numbers are allowed as far as they are not in front. And then some, this is allowed, starting with a $sign. These are valid identifiers. Now, these are the invalid identifiers at this side, because there's this space in between my and program. There is a dash here, and the only characters allowed are $sign and underscore. This is invalid. The plus sign is not allowed, so this is an invalid type of identifier. This is also invalid because it starts with a number. And this is also invalid because it's got the ampersand sign, and the only characters allowed are underscore and $sign. So I'm going to use an example of one of these invalid identifiers in Intellij so that you see what it looks like when you use an invalid, and you also see what it looks like when you use a valid identifier. Should I look into, okay, let me look into reserved words, then we can then move into Intellij so that we can see how the identifiers are used and what they also look like. So reserved words, they are basically predefined words that are used for specific functionalities when you're writing your code, and they also represent certain meanings as well. And they are always in lower cases. Maybe not all of them, but most of them are in lower cases. And they're basically categorized into two. We have 50 keywords that are reserved words in Java and 3 literals. And I can share a screenshot of the keywords for you to see as well, so you see what they are like. Or I can obviously share the link as well to where I got them from, so that you can obviously see what the keywords are, what the literals are. So the literals are true, false, and null. And the 50 keywords, an example that you would have seen today is public. You would have seen static. You would have seen class. You would have seen void. So those are like the ones that I know that we've obviously seen today so far. And those are what we call reserved words, which are keywords in Java. And there's a rule about them. They cannot be used as identifiers. So when someone told me that the identifier here was public static void, I think. So the public static void, they are no identifiers because they're obviously reserved words. And the only identifier here is just the main method name. So now we are going to move on to Intellij now, so that you obviously see how we use identifiers in Java when you're writing them. So I'm going to be creating a new Java class, still under SRC folder. Right click on that, new and Java class. And I'm going to call it Identifiers. Click on add if you get asked to do that. And then like I mentioned previously, all of your code needs to be inside a main method. So I'm going to be starting with public static void main. And I need to have my curly brackets as well, because I need to write my code inside the main method, which is this one. And I'm going to start with an example of valid identifier. We can have something like int sum total. Or we can have something like and you would see that when I use the integer data type, I didn't have to use double quotes for the values. When I used string data type, I had to use double quotes for the value, because if I take out the double quotes, it's going to be showing me red. So string values need to be inside the double quotes. I just wanted to put that out there. But an example of a valid identifier here would be sum total. And then it's also going to be address $, because $sign is an acceptable character that can be used when you are naming your identifiers. So an example of an identifier could also be one that has got more than 15 character length limit. So if I have something like this, sorry. Yep. So this is obviously more than 15 characters, is still allowed, but it's always good to have meaningful variable names. So this is obviously not meaningful. If anybody just comes to look at your code, they'll just be wondering why you have this long name. What does it mean? What does this 5 mean? Or what does this 5 represent? So it's always good to have meaningful variable names. I just wanted to show you that identifiers can have more than 15 character length limit, but it's always advisable to have between 4 to 15 character length limit. So an example of an invalid one, I think we add one here. I can just pick one of them up. So I'm going to look at the x plus y. So we can use that one. So if I have integer x plus y equals, yep, you can already see it coming up with an error here. And it's just a bit confused, like what is happening? X plus y, you just can't like understand what is happening. So in cases like this is going to be considered an invalid identifier. And if you want to resolve that, all you can do is just remove the plus sign and add an underscore, and that is going to be accepted. Or instead of having x plus y, you can just put sum total or just something meaningful that everybody else can understand. Or you can just put x underscore y, which is also acceptable because underscore is an acceptable character when you're naming your identifiers. So that is all sorted with identifiers. And then moving on, we are going to be looking into variables, which is very, very important. Going forward, you'll be hearing the word variable, maybe not just now, but at some point you'll be hearing the word variable, declaration of variables and variable names and all. So yeah, that's what we're going to be looking at next. And just going to bring up my notes for that one. Yeah. So what do we mean by variable? So variable in Java is, we can think of variable as a data container that basically saves the value of the data during the Java program execution. And then the variable is then assigned to data types. And the variable can also be referred to as a memory location or a memory container. So we have a name is given to a memory location, and then the container holds the value in the memory, and then the variable value can then be changed during the program execution. So you're going to see how variable works, how they change, and why they also change as well. And then one thing you should also take note of is variable names must be unique. You can't have integer a equals b and then say integer b a equals c. There's going to be like a discrepancy there, like why you having two variable names. One, we already have a container name called a, why you having a new container name called a again. So Java or your Intellij is not going to accept that. So variable names need to be unique. And then there are different ways of creating your variables. The first method is declaration, having the declaration and the initialization of variables separately. And the other method is having the declaration and initialization combined. So for instance, the method 1, where we have the declaration and initialization separate, we have integer first variable. So the first variable is going to be considered the variable name. The integer is considered the data type. We are going to be looking at data type as well tonight. And then this is what we call declaration of variable. If we see something like this, this is just you declaring the variable out there, or you basically creating the container. So the container here, for instance, is going to be first variable. So that's the container. But then you need to store something inside of the container. So that is where the initialization comes in. So you're basically assigning a value, or you're basically storing a value into the container. So what value or what data are you storing into the first variable container? You're storing the value or the data 20. So you're basically assigning 20 to the container name called first variable. So this is where we have the declaration and initialization separate. So instead of having, so this is going to take 2 lines of code, basically. You do this one first, you write, or you type out this one first of all on 1 line, and the second line is going to have this one. So in Java, you obviously want to be like, you don't want to have too many lines of code. You want to be, I wouldn't say dynamic, or you obviously don't want to have too many lines of code. You want to like minimize everything. So that is where we have the declaration and initialization combined. So we have integer first variable equals 20 on just 1 single line of code. So you have container called first variable, and you're basically assigning, or you're storing the value of 20 inside of it. Okay, so before we move on, I'm just going to show you how this works in Intellij as well. And then I'm going to create a new class and call it variables. And I still need to have the public static void main. Oh. Yep. And then I'm going to do the 2 different ways you can create a variable. So we have the first method, which is method 1, where we have the declaration and initialization separate. And then we have so declaring your variable is basically creating the container. So we want to have integer first variable. And this is us creating the container called first variable. Now I need to store something inside that variable. So what do I want to store? I want to store a value. So that's where I'm going to call the first variable again and assign or store a value inside of it. So I'm going to store the value of 55. And then the second method you can create variables, or how you can declare your variables, is to have the declaration and initialization together on 1 single line. You can see here we've got this line of code, and we've also got this line of code. They're basically doing the same thing. And then another way you can obviously write it is to just have all of them on one single line of code. So that's where method 2 comes in. And then I can just have integer second. I'm going to do something else. Integer first variable equals 60. Cool. So can someone tell me what I need, what I've done wrong here? Because I mentioned something when I was going through the slide about variable names. So what have I done wrong here and how do I fix it? Like, why do I have a red line under the first variable here?
I think it's because you have same name. You made the variable having the same name twice, right?
Exactly.
Declared it twice, yeah.
That's correct. So like I mentioned, variable names must be unique. So I've declared a variable here. I've assigned a value to it here. But why do I have another variable with the same name? And you can see it says variable name, variable first variable is already defined in the scope. So what do you need to do now? You just basically need to give, or you need to change the variable name to something else. So I'm just going to change it to second variable, and you can see like the line of code, the red line is gone. And that's just basically how you fix any errors that come up like that, where you've already declared the variable previously and you're declaring it again. So that's just what you need to do. So this is how you would usually create your variables. You can decide to use this method that wastes lines, or you can just decide to use this method that just has all your code on one single line. And I'll usually advise people to follow method 2 because it makes everything look neat. Then you don't get confused or anything like that. So method 2 is always the way to go. Yeah. So moving on, we're just going to be looking at the naming conventions and why they are important, what we are meant to do, and so on. Okay, but before we go on, I'm just going to do, actually, yeah, let's go on. So the Java naming convention, like you would have probably seen me do this. So Camel Case is usually used in Java for writing your method names or your variable names for packages and classes. So Camel Case is, I'm just going to open my Intellij back. So Camel Case is something like this. So, you know, camel has got hunchback. So Camel Case in this instance is the first letter of the first word is lowercase. And then the first letter of the second word is capital. So that's where the Camel Case comes from, because it goes low, high, low. So that's where the Camel Case situation comes from. So the Camel Case is usually used in Java for writing your method names or your variable names. And then another thing you should take note of is class names should be nouns. And so we're not looking into the different, how do I say this? So we're looking into the different naming conventions for different approaches in Java. So we've got methods, we've got variable name, we've got classes, interfaces, and all. So in terms of classes and interface, the interface name should be capitalized, and you need to avoid acronyms and abbreviations, and your class name should be nouns, and the first letter of the word should be capitalized as well. So you really don't have to cram this, you just need to have a good knowledge of it. And you can obviously Google it online as well. And also, Intellij will obviously tell you if the word needs to be capitalized or needs to be changed, because if you're going to be using a specific word in a place where a class or an interface is meant to be used, then if you use small b, there's a high chance that your test is not going to run. It's probably going to show an error. Then you need to obviously fix that by adding a capital B in front, because interfaces should be capitalized. The first letter of the word should be capitalized. But then if you look at the other ones, method names or variable names, if you look at method, for instance, we've obviously said should be verbs. In mixed cases, the first letter is lowercase, and then the first letter of the first word is lowercase, and then the first letter of the second word is uppercase. So an example would be speed up. So this is cases where we use camel case cases in. We have change gear, lowercase, capital case. And then for variable names, they need to be meaningful, they need to be short. You don't want it to be too long. And then one character variable name should be avoided. So I think I use it in one of my presentation slides. So int z, it's okay to use it, but we don't know what z means, like the container name. What is the container name storing? We really don't know. So it's always good to use meaningful words in that case. And then we have an example of variable name here is the speed. We have the gear. And how do I know that this is the variable? It's got a value assigned to it. It's got the equal sign, and the equal sign is taking in a value. So that is how I know this is the variable name. And then we also have constant variables or packages. You would obviously see, so those that have started their Intellij setup or their automation setup, you would have seen packages. The imports are called packages, and they are always written in lower cases. So the ones in black are package names, and they're always written in lower cases. So you have obviously seen that already. And then we have the constant variables, and these all need to be in upper cases. And if you've got two words that you're using together and you don't want to have them like this positive infinity, you can always separate them with an underscore, but you can't put a space in between it. It has to be separated with an underscore or no space at all. So you have a choice to make. And then moving on, we're going to be looking into data types in Java. So I just want to see and look at the time. Okay. Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm just checking what slides I've got left, so I know whether I'll be able to finish today and when I need to stop. Yep. So we've got data types in Java, and then what do we understand by data types? I know I've been mentioning data types a couple of times today, so we're just going to look at that quickly. Data types. So data types can be considered as prefix to variables, because your variable is going to determine, or whatever you're storing in your variable is going to determine the type of data type you want to assign to it. So you've obviously seen int z equals 10. So this is my data type, int or integer. The z is the variable name, and the 10 is the value of the variable. And why do I have int here or integer. Integer takes up numbers, all numbers. So 10 obviously tells me the type of data type I'm meant to use for this particular variable name. So if I've got z equals only, then my integer is not going to suffice because only is not a whole number. Only is a string or it's an array of letters. So it's basically a string. So in this case, my data type is going to be string z equals only. And then, like I mentioned, if you have a string, it needs to be in a double quote. So we're going to do all of this in IntelliJ as well. So you see. So data types, there are two different types of data types. We've got the primitive and non-primitive. Under the primitive, we're going to be looking at Boolean, character, integer, floating point numbers. And then under the non-primitive, we've got array, we've got string. And you can also see the different types of the primitive as well. We've got the numeric ones, which are character, byte, short, integer, long, float, double. And we've also got the Boolean type as well. And Boolean means true or false. So we're going to also see how that works as well when we are moving into IntelliJ to experiment and do all of those. Right, moving on to the next slide. So this is just for information purposes. I'm not going to go through each and every single one of them. I just added slides here, so you just have it for information purpose. So byte is an 8-bit to complement integer. Short is a 16-bit to complement integer. Int is a 32-bit to complement integer. Long is a 64-bit to complement integer. And basically, the higher the number, the more values it stores. So 64-bit is going to store more integer values than the byte data type. And then we've also got the float and the double. And this kind of work in similar ways. And then this has got a 32-bit storage size, and this has got a 64-bit storage size. So you obviously see how this also or why they are important in Java programming as well. We are doing the experiment part in IntelliJ. And then we also have the Boolean and the char. So the Boolean represents only one bit of information. Is it that 0 or 1? Is it that true or false? So that's what the Boolean represents, true or false. And then we have char. This is not really used, and it's basically just used to store characters or for Unicode characters as well. So for instance, this Unicode represents a square. So we really don't use that, or it is not really used in Java programming, but it's just good to like have an information as to what it's all about. So we have char or character. So I think we're going to be looking into IntelliJ now just to see how all of these data type works. And these are just like the major ones that you're going to be using. I know we've also got the string and the array as well. That is also important and it's going to be looked at when you're doing the OOP, object-oriented programming next week. So that's going to be looked at. So the string and the array. But today we're just going to focus on some of this one. So IntelliJ. And then I'm going to create a new Java class and call that data type. Click on add. And then the first one we have is float or double. So that's what we're going to look at. And as usual, your code needs to be inside the main method. And you create a main method by typing public static void main. And then I'm going to start with integer. So int, I'm just trying to think of a reasonable variable name. Number value equals int number value equals 15 divided by 3. Yep. Out dot print line so I'm going to say and what did I do here? I have a variable name called number value, and I have assigned the data type integer to it because I know the division of 15 divided by 3 is going to give me an whole number, which is 5. So that's why I've assigned the integer data type to my variable. And then I obviously want to print out the value of this division as well, like the result of the division. So I've done system.out.print. Then I've got number value results. And this number value is going to be my container name. So 15 divided by 3 is 5. So the 5 is going to be stored in a container called number value, which is this one. Then if I'm going to be printing out the 5, I'm not going to come here and say, oh, print out 5 for me. I just need to put in the container name so that Java knows which container to go to print out the value for me. And the container name in that instance is number value. And what I just have here is just so that it shows that the result, just so that it shows the result in a nicer way on the console screen when we run it. So you can have anything meaningful in there, but I just want number value result, and then it's going to print out the value result for me. So if I run this now, the data type, click on run. So on the console here, I should see number value results, and that result is going to be the division of 5, 15 by 3, and the answer is 5. So you can see number value results was exactly what I typed in here, and the number value is the container that is storing the division of 15, division of 3 by 15, 15 by 3. But yeah, the value is 5. So number value result equals 5. So this is the result printed out here. And then if you want to see how float works and double work, I'm going to show you now. But before then, I'm going to ask everyone a question. So if I have if I have 15 divided by 2, can someone tell me what the result is going to be? 15 divided by 2. And also
7.5.
take note of the, okay, so 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. And I want you to tell me what is going to be shown on the screen, taking into account the data type that I have used. So I've used the integer data type, and I know someone said 7. So I want to hear other people's answers as well. If it's in the chat, let me know what's your answer going to be. Someone said 8. Okay. Any other answer? I've got 7.5.
7.
I've got 7. I've got 8. I've got another 7. 7, 7, 7. Yeah, that's correct. So the answer is going to be 7. And the reason is because integer takes in an whole number. So 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. So this is me utilizing the one line comment. So this is going to be ignored. So 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. But because I'm using the integer data type, the 0.5 is going to be cleared out, and then my result is just going to be 7. So if I run this now, the value here should show as 7. Yep. So number value result equals 7. So assuming I want to have this, I want the 7.5 to show, all I need to do is to utilize a different data type. So this is where float and double comes in. So I'm going to have, actually, just going to copy this and just duplicate it for the float and the double. I'm going to have float, number value, float. I'm going to add the double, number value, double, and make a few changes here as well. So it prints out the correct value for me. And then you can see this is obviously highlighted in an orange-ish color. And you can see the 15 divided by 2 is not. So, and it's obviously told me I need to do something. So if I put my cursor on that, it was showing me something previously. I don't know what's happening now. Oh yeah, okay. Just need to be patient. So it says integer division in floating point context. This one is also going to show me probably the same thing. So what I need to do to fix this would be, so the reason why this is showing up or being highlighted is because of the data type I've used. So in Java or Intellij as a person picked up that you are using the float data type. You need to also make changes to your to the calculation that you want to do. So 15 has to have an F at the back, which represents floats, and you can see the highlighted part is being cleared out. And for the double data type as well, it needs to have the D at the back of the 15. So if I'm going to be running this now, so this should show me decimal point values. So that's the usefulness of the float and the double. The float and the double would show you decimal point values. So 7.5 if it's 0000 is going to show you the number of zeros. So the float is going to show you 7 decimal points, and then the double should show you, I think, 15 or 16 decimal points. So we can obviously clarify that. So if we try to run this now, this should show you the integer will show you 7 as the answer. This should show you 7.5 so. And they should also show you 7.5 so. So if we try to run that now, yeah, you can see it is showing us 7.5, but then let me try to change the value, the calculation I've got here. So if I have 15 divided by 4, I believe that should show me more decimal points. And then I'll have 15 divided by 6 for the double. And if I run that, hopefully it shows us more decimal points. Oh, okay, I need to think of a better calculation. Okay, let me show you. I'll just show you 10 divided by 3 instead of 15, because that looks as if it's just giving me shorter decimal points. 10 divided by 3. So this should actually show us more decimal points.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Okay.
I don't fully understand why you put in the F and the D, and I also don't know
Okay.
what you mean by double. I didn't understand that.
Okay, that's fine. I'm going to explain it now. So the reason why I've got the F at the end is if I have just the 10 divided by 3 and the data type is integer, so the data type is what is affecting the calculation from being highlighted. So you can see the 10 divided by 3 here is not getting highlighted. And that is because the data type that I'm using is integer. So it's obviously expecting you to provide an whole number. And if I'm using the float data type or the double data type, so it's expecting me to use the floating keyword, which is F, at the inside my calculation, basically, so that it gives me the correct value. And that's why I also have the D represents double, the F represents float. And then the float is going to give me 7 decimal point values if I'm going to be doing like some specific calculations. And then for the double, it should give me 15 or 16 decimal point values or results if I'm doing any specific calculations with doubles or floats. So that is why we need to have the F at the end so that the correct result is printed out. And you need to have the D at the end so that the correct result is printed out. And you can obviously see like Intellij is also highlighting that part for you as well and letting you know that the floating system is being used in place. And obviously something is missing in your code. So you can see the integer division in floating point context. So you need to add the F sign, and adding the F sign basically clears out the warning that is being shown. So it's no longer being highlighted. And I think the same goes for the D as well. It's going to be highlighted in, I don't know what color that is, or orange. But it's also telling you that the floating mechanism is in place because of the data type you are using. So in this case, I want to use the D, the double data type, so that the correct value is printed out for me. So I don't know if that kind of explains the whole floating and double system.
I get it. The only thing I still just don't. I know float rounds up the number. But I don't understand what double does.
Okay, so floating doesn't round up the number. So it basically prints out more decimal point values. So the results are here. So for the first one, the integer value 10 divided by 3, if you have int as your data type, is going to give you 3, not 3.33333, just 3. Because integer takes in whole number. So it's only going to give you 3 and discard the rest of the decimal points, basically. And then for the float, it's going to display more decimal points, like the accurate division. So 10 divided by 3 is meant to give you 3.333, the 3 being continuous. So if you're using the floating data type, it's going to be giving us decimal places, like 7 decimal places, I mean. So we have 2, 4, 6, 7. So it's going to give us 3.3333333 in 7 places after the decimal point. So the floating system basically gives us 7 decimal places, and the double gives us 16 decimal points. So it's a way of giving us explicit results if you're going to be needing either double or floating data type within your code or anything like that, just based on what you want your program to do. So I know I've never used float or double data type before. In my normal working environment, I've never used it before. but it's always good to know that they actually do exist, and this is what they obviously do as well. Integer stores all numbers. Float gives you all numbers and decimal point up to 7 decimal places. Double gives you all numbers and decimal point up to 16 decimal places. So that's just the difference between integer, float, and double. So I hope I've been able to explain that a little bit better.
Yeah, I get it now. Thank you.
Okay. So the last part of the class, we are just going to look into Boolean, and like I mentioned, Boolean basically gives 2 values, true or false, and it's just as simple as that. So for Boolean, we are going to be starting with the Boolean data type, which is Boolean. And I'm going to give you a value of false. And I'm just going to copy this. I don't have to retype that. And the value I'm expecting to be printed out is what I've obviously assigned to it. So I just wanted to print out true for me. So if I wanted to print out false, I just need to assign false to the value here. So I'm just going to run this one. So you see that the value printed out here is false. And just here. So it's either true or false. It's just as simple as that. Depending on what value you pass in, that's what's going to be passed out. And if I change this one to true, then they should give me the true value, true. And basically, that's all you need to know about Boolean. Is it that true or false? Okay, so I think I'm just going to pause here for a bit and probably end the class here today and just answer any question anybody has got. And then from tomorrow, we're going to continue from operators, and then we'll also look into conditional loops, conditional statements tomorrow as well. So you can either unmute your mic to ask your questions, or you can put them in the chat box as well. Or if you want me to re-explain anything at all that we've looked into today, I can also use this time to do that.
Hello, Hui. Please, I just have a quick question. Okay, so when I was creating my page object folder, I didn't add the gates, even though the option was given on my screen. So what is the implication of not adding the gate? And could I still add it now despite creating the page object already? Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So starting from the second question, yes, you can re-add it back, but you need to delete the page object and create a new one. Then you get the option to add it. And then your first question was, could you repeat the first question again? Sorry.
I think you answered it both, basically, because if I have to delete it and then re-add it, that's what I said. I didn't put it in the first time that I set up
okay.
the object. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So basically, the reason why you are all going to be seeing that option is because you cloned Oyin's repository. She gave you a link, and the link contains what she has pushed to the Git repository, and you basically cloned it, which means you downloaded a copy on all of your systems. So any changes you make will be on that specific branch. So I know I'm all speaking gibberish right now, but there's going to be a class on Git and Git version control as well. But the reason why you are seeing the option to add is because you are working on a local version of Oyin's project.
So
So I'm
what
just going to
is
make note of
gonna,
that.
okay, sorry. So what would happen if we are starting a project like on Hello World, like just starting upfront, not the Blue Cross, I'm sorry, Blue Sky Citadel,
Citadel.
Blue,
I don't
yeah.
think you should see. I don't think you should see the add option. I'm having the add option because I connected my Intellij to my GitHub, so that's why I'm seeing the add option.
Okay.
But if you've not connected your Intellij to GitHub, then you shouldn't see the add option at all.
So what is the implication of the GitHub? The Git. Yeah.
So the Git is just a version control system that can be used to store your code. I don't want to speak about that today, so it's not all confusing. There's going to be a class on that coming up as well. So we'll just leave. Let's just leave like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Admin, you can stop the recording while I just answer a couple of other questions as well. So I don't know if you've got any questions. You can ask me now. You don't have to be shy. I can recover a couple of things that I've talked about as well. Or you can put your question in the chat box.
Hello, Oyin.
Hi.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. For the float data type,